Have you ever been in a situation where everyone around you seemed to agree on something, but you secretly thought they were wrong? Maybe in a school, maybe at work, maybe online. You liked a video on TikTok, then opened the comments and saw thousands of people making fun of it, and suddenly that like didn't feel so right anymore. Or maybe one day you were thinking how inadequate Trump is, then you opened YouTube and saw him on big podcasts and everybody was praising him. And you thought, wait, maybe Trump isn't that bad after all. Or maybe you saw a movie, loved it, and then went online only to find out everyone calling it terrible. And somehow your opinion started changing, not because you watched it again, not because you discovered new information, but because everybody else seemed to agree. Most of us like to believe we're independent thinkers. We imagine that if the entire room said something ridiculous, we would be the one person brave enough to stand up and say, no, that's obviously wrong. But in 1950s, a psychologist named Solomon Asch decided to test that idea, and what he discovered was unsettling. Because under the right conditions, ordinary people would ignore the evidence right in front of their eyes just to avoid standing alone. The experiment seemed unbelievably simple. A group of college students sat together in a classroom. They were told they were participating in a visual perception test, nothing unusual. The experimenter showed them two cards. One card contained a single line. The second card contained three different lines, labeled A, B, and C. Their task was simple. Choose which line matched the length of the first line. The answer was obvious. This wasn't a difficult puzzle, it wasn't an IQ test. Under normal circumstances, people got the answer right more than 99% of the time. At first, everything went exactly as expected. Everyone gave the correct answer, then something strange happened. One by one, the participant began choosing the wrong line. Not slightly wrong, obviously wrong. The answer was clearly C, but the first person said A, the second person said A. The third person said A. Soon, every single person in the room was confidently choosing the wrong answer, except one, the real participant. What he didn't know was that everybody else was secretly working with the experimenter. The entire group had been instructed beforehand to give incorrect answers. The experiment wasn't testing eyesight, it was testing conformity, and now the participant faced a choice. Trust his own eyes or trust the crowd. If you are watching this right now, you are probably thinking, easy, I would trust my eyes. Most people think that. Reality turned out to be different. When Asch analyzed the results, he found out that around 75% of participants conformed at least once. Let that sink in. 3 out of 4 people knowingly agreed with the group that was obviously wrong. Overall, participants went along with the incorrect majority about 37% of the time. Not because they were unintelligent, not because they couldn't see the answer, because social pressure is far more powerful than most of us realize. Some participants later admitted they genuinely began doubting themselves. They looked at the line, they knew what they saw, but after hearing everyone else disagree, they started thinking, maybe I'm missing something out. Maybe everyone else sees something I don't. Others knew the group was wrong, but agreed anyway. They didn't want to stand out. They didn't want to create tension. They didn't want to be the awkward person disagreeing with everyone else. And that's what makes this experiment so disturbing. The group never threatened anyone. Nobody was punished. Nobody was forced. The pressure came entirely from being alone. But Asch wasn't finished. He wanted to know exactly what gave the crowd its power. Was it the size of the group, or was it something else? So he ran more experiments. When participants faced only one person who disagreed with them, conformity barely happened. When 2 people opposed them, the pressure increased. When 3 people opposed them, conformity jumped dramatically. But after that, adding more people made surprisingly little difference. A crowd of 15 wasn't much more persuasive than a crowd of 3, which revealed something interesting. The crowd's power wasn't really coming from its size, it was coming from its unanimity, the feeling that everybody agreed. Then Asch tried something even more fascinating. He added a single ally, just one. One person who refused to follow the crowd. One person who answered correctly. Suddenly, conformity collapsed. The pressure of the majority dropped dramatically. People became far more willing to trust themselves, Think about that for a second. A group of 6 or 7 people could pressure someone into doubting their own eyes, but a single dissenter could break the spell, not because they provided evidence, not because they gave a brilliant argument, simply because they proved that disagreement was possible. The participant was no longer alone, and that changed everything. The implications go far beyond a room full of lines, because most conformity today doesn't happen in laboratories. It happens online every day. You open social media, you see thousands of people sharing the same opinion, the same outrage, the same trend, the same belief, and without realizing it, your brain starts performing the exact calculation Asch discovered 70 years ago. If everyone else thinks this, maybe I should too. Sometimes that's useful. Society couldn't function if nobody ever agreed with anyone. But there is a difference between consensus and conformity. Consensus happens when people independently arrive at the same conclusion. Conformity happens when people stop thinking independently because everyone else already agrees. And that's where things became dangerous. Because history is filled with moments when large groups were wrong. Sometimes catastrophically wrong. The crowd can be wise, but the crowd can also be blind. At the end of his article, Asch made an observation that still feels relevant today. He argued that society needs agreement, but agreement only has value when people contribute their own honest judgment. When people surrender that judgment just to fit in, something important is lost. The encouraging part is that not everyone conformed. Some participants stayed independent the entire time, not because they never felt doubt, most of them did. The difference was that they recovered from it. They trusted what they saw, even when standing alone felt uncomfortable. And maybe that's the real lesson of this experiment. Courage isn't never feeling pressure, it's recognizing the pressure and refusing to let it decide what is true. Because sometimes the hardest thing a person can say is also the simplest. Everyone else might be wrong.